Last season wasn't kind to every fantasy stud. We had some players who kind of let us down despite great expectations. But which of those guys are going to bounce back the strongest? Reminder that if you join us on flockfantasy.com/endgame, join now and then you get access to so much that we have to offer besides just our weekly videos. That includes access to join us and compete with us on our mock draft. You get in early, pick your spot. They fill up fast, and I guarantee they're going to fill up even faster as we get closer to the season. We have our rankings all preseason long, and that includes for best ball and dynasty, which, by the way, we also have an 8-part video course on how to build a dynasty champion. We take all of our expertise and put it into a nice little course there for you. So think about joining right now. You get 30% off any subscription and you get access to all that plus so much more. flockfantasy.com/endgame. Now let's talk about some players who were maybe a little disappointing last year that we think will come back strong in 2023. Headlined by a running back who I still feel like is just underappreciated, maybe a little bit undervalued. Look, Naji Harris, maybe he will never be the RB1 overall, but I feel almost like he's a steal because people, had great expectations and they've been disappointed. So what would make you think that he might be a good bounce back candidate?
Yeah, the more I think about Najee, the more I think I'm probably too low on him right now because he burned me so badly last year. But looking back, I think we see a much, much better Najee this year. First of all, I got to imagine that Liz Frank injury he suffered in the preseason was way worse than they let on because he didn't look like the same guy for most of the season. But down the stretch, he looked much better. He was getting much more of the work, scoring touchdowns. And the Steelers have actually improved this offensive line in the draft. And even with the tight end they drafted, Washington, I really like him as a run blocker. So I think it's going to be a better offensive line, a healthier Najee. I think he has a big bounce back this year. And people were so burned last year. He's really one of the best values in the early rounds, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the thing is, look, I'll always go with the guy who I know is guaranteed volume. It's funny to me almost how people were so big on Jalen Warren, and before that, it was whoever else was the backup, to Najee in Pittsburgh. It's like they're preying on his downfall almost. They think that someone is going to take over that job. It's not happening. Najee showed that he's the guy and the only guy that matters in that running game. And he's a good pass-catching running back. He's going to get the volume guaranteed. And this is not going to suddenly be a pass-happy offense. It's Mike Tomlin still, right? It's not Big Ben at quarterback. Kenny Pickett looked better throughout the second half of the year, but because they managed how much he threw the ball, this offense will still run through Najee. He's going to get the touches. That offense should be a little bit better. I'll take that every time. Now, last year, believe it or not, some people weren't drafting Travis Kelce as their first tight end. I saw them go Mark Andrews because they thought he was going to be the number one tight end again, and of course, he wasn't. Can he get back to that?
Oh, I don't know if he can get back to being the number one tight end, but I do think we see something closer to what we saw 2 years ago because this Ravens offense is going to be drastically different this year. Greg Roman is gone. They've added Zay Flowers. They've added Odell Beckham. They still have Bateman. They still have Andrews. They are going to throw the ball a lot more. Now, maybe they're not going to be a top 5 passing offense, but they're certainly going to be in the top half of the league in terms of passing. And I don't think, Odell, come on, how many games are we expecting from him? Bateman, is he ever going to do it? I still think Andrews is going to be one of the major target getters on this team, on a team that's going to surprise a lot of people by how much they throw and how good they are at throwing the ball. So I still really like Andrews. I'm not taking him over Kelce, but he's still my tight end too.
Well, look, if Lamar Jackson is going to throw for 6,000 yards like he says, Andrews is good for at least 1.5K, right? But look, Andrews really doesn't have that far to bounce back. As it turns out, it even surprised me. He was the tight end 4 in terms of total PPR points and tied for 3rd in points per game. He was still actually pretty good. It just didn't feel like it because, again, we set the bar so high. I mean, he set that bar for himself, granted, but why can't he get back to it if Lamar, who is now wrapped up under contract, actually stays healthy all year, and now they're throwing the ball more? It seems like he is actually going to be undervalued this year. All right, I know you were big on Naji last year. One guy you might have maybe even been bigger on was Rashad White. And so, of course, you heard it when he didn't break out and didn't have the amazing season that maybe we had hoped for. But there's actually maybe more hope this year that he actually does better.
Yeah, because there's no Leonard Fournette there, and there's nobody I'm really worried about to take touches away from him. Sean Tucker wasn't one of my favorite prospects anyways in this draft class, and then he didn't even get drafted, so I'm not worried about that. The worry here is the offense may be terrible, but that should still be okay for Rashad White because we like Rashad White for his pass catching, and I think in this offense, he should catch a pretty high number of passes, so I don't think Rashad White's going to have a monster season, but where he's being drafted, I think he's at least an RB2 in PPR leagues, if not better, and he's still being really, really slept on. So I do think we see a better Rashad White. This is still a talented guy, a great pass catcher, definitely one of my favorite later round running backs.
Yeah, and that's the thing is everyone's going to say, well, look what happened in rookie year. It didn't happen. Next, let's go on to the next young guy. Sometimes it takes more than a year, but again, the thing you always want to look for running back is opportunity. Guys, Fournette is gone. It's all Rashad White now. There's almost no competition for touches. And even though that offense will definitely not be as good without Tom Brady, the running offense might be better because they're actually going to commit more to the run. And we can't overlook the fact that that offensive line had so many injuries last year. That's part of the reason why the Bucs kind of disappointed. If they can stay intact, White, just through volume alone, is almost guaranteed to have a much better season. Feels like a very similar situation for Michael Pittman with the Colts, a team that just completely fell apart. And it really wasn't his fault that they're playing musical chairs at quarterback. Now they got their guy. Is that enough to make Pittman to a solid fantasy asset at wide receiver?
I don't think so. I think you're going to need 1 year. I think he's going to need 1 year. I like Pittman. I think Pittman's a great player. But it's more like Anthony Richardson. And I think Anthony Richardson could become a great quarterback. But I think year one, he's going to have struggles throwing the football with accuracy. So Pittman is a guy, like next year, I'll probably be higher on him than I am this year. I don't think we see a bounce back this year. I think we see a similar year. Maybe he catches more downfield passes, but he catches far less passes because his catch rate will probably go way down. So, I don't know. Pittman, a guy I'm not really on this year, maybe next year.
Well, here's the ironic thing. I'm not a big Anthony Richardson guy. He's someone I still have a lot of doubts about. But I think he'll be better for Michael Pittman, and here's why. They upgraded, of course, at quarterback, and they're kind of solidifying the offensive line, doing the things they need to do. But they didn't really take any receiver that's going to threaten Michael Pittman's target share. And a lot of times young quarterbacks, what they do? They hone in on their favorite target. Who's going to be that favorite target? It's going to be Michael Pittman. This is an offense that's going to be very simplified. And when Pittman is open, he's going to get the ball. I almost guarantee. Yeah, it'll be run heavy, but I think Pittman still gets targeted. Pittman's still a quality receiver. I almost feel like it can't be worse than last year. So I think he bounces back, not in a huge way. But again, maybe last year we overvalued him a bit, and I think it's going to go the opposite way this year. All right, here we go. Y'all been waiting for this. It's Russ time. And by that, we're going to talk about, is Russell Wilson actually going to bounce back? That's $1 million question. You think that can't be any worse in that situation, but is it going to be enough to really make him worth even drafting in fantasy?
Well, that's the thing. He's probably going to bounce back because how can he be worse than last year? If he's worse or as bad as last year, then he's completely cooked and really done for in the NFL. But you got to think Sean Payton will get whatever's left out of Russell Wilson. My worry is it enough? Is it enough to support a really fantasy-friendly offense? And is it enough to support a QB? Definitely not enough for me in a 1 QB league. Is it even enough in a 2 QB Superflex league? I'm not sure. I have my doubts. I have my reservations. I'm not ready to say he's going to bounce back. He'll be at least better, but I don't know if he'll be good enough.
I'm going to kind of hesitantly say I think he'll get kind of back to almost what he was in Seattle. Not fully, because I don't think we'll ever see that version of Russell again. He's not exactly in his prime anymore, but obviously Sean Payton's got the pedigree. it was a lot of external factors that don't have to do with the X's and O's of football, right? The contract that he got, all the attention he got, the fact that he basically ran the show with a rookie head coach who's way in over his head. They've cut out all of the noise. They've cut out all these personal trainers and guys that Russ had. They're actually going to make him focus on just playing good football. I think that'll be enough that we can see a good version of Russ. Maybe it's not the best version, but look, if you're waiting on quarterback and you're going to take a guy late, I think that he could deliver. Then back to Pittsburgh. Look, Deontay Johnson wasn't bad last year. He just wasn't great in fantasy because he didn't score. And I mean, he literally did not score a touchdown. I mean, we know that's got to change. But what do we really expect? Do you think that we can see Deontay Johnson like we saw a couple of years ago, who was really elite?
I don't think so, because it's like you said earlier with Najee. Like, yes, Kenny Pickett was better down the stretch, but that's because they basically took as much off of his plate as they could. The run game got better with Najee, and they just basically said, don't mess it up. I think Deontay will bounce back to some degree, though, because like you said, literally zero touchdowns last year. Remember 2 years ago, Miles Sanders had 0 touchdowns, and everybody was like, this guy never scores touchdowns. And then what did he have last year? 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever it was. So I think Deontay Johnson will certainly score many more touchdowns than 0 this year, but I don't really see him catching like a ton more passes, if any more, or getting a ton more yards, if any more. So he'll be a bit better than he was last year, but I don't think we're going to see him back like he was 2 years ago.
You know what? Actually, I don't either. And Deontay Johnson, I think he's fine, but he's really not been a guy who's ever gotten me too excited, because he's one of these better in real life than fantasy players. People look, he's very efficient, right? If you even look at things like his reception perception, which we definitely rely on as a trustworthy, source, it's not going to really inspire me to draft him because, again, I don't think that even if he bounces back, what does he get? Maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns. I feel like George Pickens is the guy I'm really more interested in that offense. Naji Harris I'm interested in. I think Deontay Johnson is fine, but really, I feel like there's other players that just have more upside. And then we've got to see a better version of Brandon Cooks than we saw last year. I mean, we didn't even know if he was going to play from week to week, and not even because he was injured all the time. Now he's going from Houston to Dallas. I mean, are we going to be way too low on him this year? Is he going to go back to vintage Brandon Cooks?
I don't think so. In the words of the infamous Dylan Brooks, he's old. And he's probably dusty. So I know it's Dallas, and I know it's easy to like, oh, this offense is, I mean, certainly the offense is better than Houston, but remember when they brought T.Y. Hilton off the streets last year, and every now and then he'd have a big play, make a big catch? I think that's what we're going to see from Brandon Cooks this year. This is the CeeDee Lamb show. Gallup should be healthier. I just don't see it for Brandon Cooks. I mean, will he be better than he was in Houston? Of course, because he was terrible, and he didn't even play some games, but I still don't think he's really going to be fantasy relevant this year.
Wow, not even fantasy relevant. I mean, I'll take a shot on him because this is a guy who's not even 30 years old, and he's still got the speed. He's got what it takes to make big plays. Like you said, in that offense, it's pretty favorable for a receiver, and this is the guy they really went after. If you think about it, there's a lot of rumors, going this guy, draft this guy. They got Brandon Cooks. They went out and traded for him. So that, to me, that means they're going to use him. And, we talk about how they might pass the ball more under McCarthy. I like Cooks as a mid to late round pick. I think this is a guy who, maybe he won't be vintage Cooks, but I think he'll definitely take some people by surprise. Those are some of the players we think could come back strong. Who are some of the players we just have to have? Well, check out